I'm asked nearly every day how humans could possibly go extinct, and most importantly, how am I going to die? The sender of the email message asking the question is more focused on their own life than on the life of all of us. In any event, how are you going to die? How are we going to lose habitat for humans on this most beautiful of planets? Well, I imagine that a leading cause of death, if not the leading cause of death, at least in industrialized countries, will be lack of water coming through the taps. Without water coming through the taps, most people won't have the slightest idea what to do. Without clean water, potable water coming out of the tap, a lot of people are going to die in a very short period of time from things like dysentery. So, water is a primary concern. If you are at all interested in extending your life, then the first place you should look is to clean water. If the water's not coming through the taps, where's it coming from? Well, for the short-term basis, on this property, in this house, we have a means of filtering water. We'll turn next to how we filter the water, then we'll look at where the water comes from that we're going to put through the filter. Here in our laundry room, we have a water filter that takes advantage of charcoal to filter the water. You can see that it's nearly full, and this will provide potable water for a relatively short period of time. Obviously, this much water, it's 2.5 gallons in this tank, is not going to last very long. So in addition to this 2.5 gallons, we also have the means of collecting water from here on the property. We'll take a look at that next. Bear in mind, these charcoal filters don't last forever, so you need some water to clean them up. None of this is intended for the long haul. I abandoned at a very, very low price the homestead I created for more than $1 million in New Mexico when I realized that the full effects of the aerosol masking effect will remove any ability for humans to survive on this planet beyond a few weeks or months, or maybe a couple of years if you've got a properly designed bunker, in which case you'll only be marinating in ionizing radiation as nuclear facilities melt down, as stratospheric ozone is stripped away so that you can't go outside. You'll be living on a dead planet. I'm not interested. So now I manage to, along with my partner, maintain water supply and a couple or 3 weeks worth of food, because beyond that, there's no point in living that kind of life, at least not for me. Here in our infrastructure room, that is with the furnace and the blower and the water heater, we have a little bit of what we call the apocalypse food. So we have dessert pouches and we have milk pouches with chocolate milk and regular milk. Notice that all of these need to have water added to them. So again, the primary importance of potable water comes into play. We don't have a lot of so-called apocalypse food down here, enough for us to last a few weeks, us and our neighbors maybe a couple of weeks. But remember, according to climate scientist and professor James Hansen, all of those aerosols fall out of the sky in about 5 days. Those aerosols fall out as a result of reduced industrial activity. And so I suspect we'll lose habitat shortly after industrial activity ceases or continues to ramp up to the point that we lose habitat as a result of too many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. One way or the other, humans are going to lose habitat, just as vertebrates and mammals that are non-humans have already begun losing habitat, just as humans are already losing habitat all around the globe. All of us are going to get there much faster than any of us want to, and to quote the phrase, faster than expected. Here's a little bit of food to last a relatively short period of time to get us through those hard times in case there's some sort of comeback for the planet when people realize what they are doing is causing the loss of habitat for all of us on this most beautiful of planets. What about growing all of your own food? Been there, done that, didn't even get the t-shirt. In New Mexico, at the homestead I established there, I learned how to grow all of my own food, not just for me, but for the other 4 people with whom I was living. And that included planting hundreds of trees, like this peach tree here, that we have recently planted on this property. Now, the fruit trees that I planted in New Mexico are all producing fruit at this point. This one may or may not produce a peach. And even if it produces a peach or two, it's certainly not going to produce canfuls of peaches. So this, like the joke I make about the last sociopath dying when they ran out of canned peaches in their bunker, this too is a joke of sorts, courtesy of Pauline, who just needed to have a peach tree for us to make fun of Guy about. More about perennial foods, but not quite as perennial as the peach tree we just looked at. This bed is for perennial plants, including asparagus, honeyberry, raspberry, blueberry, and we haven't planted it all out yet, so there's going to be many more strawberries in here, along with perhaps some other things. But this is intended for basically shrubs and asparagus, shrubs that produce fruit, sweet fruit, and asparagus. Next in the category of perennial food comes chickens. Chickens. So here we have 10 hens representing 4 varieties, and we have this chicken coop that is made completely or almost completely of reused plastic to prevent a little of that plastic from going into the ocean, and then a very nice pen for the chicks, which are now only about 4 weeks old and will start producing eggs in another couple or 3 months. So we're still a ways from producing those eggs. We're doing this for joy. Pauline likes having the chickens. I like having the eggs. Just as with the planting beds and the peach tree we already saw, Pauline likes tending the plants, growing the food, and I really like eating the food. So this is the perfect match as far as I'm concerned. I'm not sure she's getting a good deal out of it. Now on to annual plants that we can grow for food in our planting beds. Another few examples of perennial plants before we move to the annual plant beds. Here we have a rose. Can be used, the rose hips can be used for making tea. It's very healthy. Here we have an inadvertent food plant, dandelion. The leaves are excellent in salads. And we also have a couple of planted rhubarbs here that are very tasty. So a few more perennial plants, one of which is found almost everywhere in the circumboreal northern portion of the planet. That's the dandelion. The others we planted, and maybe we'll get some fruit out of them. In addition, there's the hosta plant, this big leafed, relatively large plant, also edible. A landscape plant that also happens to be edible. So we have a lot going on here. Now onto the annual plant beds. We built 3 planting beds 4 feet by 10 feet, and they're all 10 inches tall. As you can see here, this is the bracket. We got 4 brackets for each one, obviously, and we got 3 of them, so the 12 brackets actually cost more than the wood. We went to a sawmill right across the river into New Hampshire and got all of the 1 by 10 boards for about 45 bucks. The brackets cost more than that. Relatively simple system to put together, and obviously we're going to fill it with soil to grow the plants in. First, we're going to put some hardware cloth on the bottom to prevent hungry critters from crawling underneath and eating all the carrots and such that we grow. So these are nice planting beds. They're going to be about 10 inches tall. That's more than big enough to grow carrots and other root crops, not to mention tomatoes and so forth above the ground. And as you can see, there's not just this one, but behind me here, you can see the second and third planting beds. So altogether we have 4 by 10 times 3, so we have 120 square feet of plantable space for annuals. That's quite a bit of room for Pauline to grow food that I'm going to eat. See how this is working out great again? Here we are about 4 feet, a little over a meter above the driveway where we had the 3 planting beds previously. You can see the 1 planting bed in the background there. Up on this terrace, of which there are 3 terraces on this property, up on this first terrace, you can see that the water is accumulating. We live on a road called Pond Road, and the pond in question is the municipal water supply above us from an elevational perspective. And so this is a very wet property. The water just keeps popping up here. What we're going to do is build a small pool here and line it with rocks so that it remains relatively clean. And this will be our water supply that goes into that water filter that we saw earlier in the episode. So we'll have a pretty steady, reliable source of water for which we do not have to leave the property. Between the water, again, for the relatively short term, the food for a few weeks at most, the plants that we are growing, and our ability to cook all of those things, we should be able to last another 2 to 5 weeks beyond the complete collapse of industrial civilization. That's more than enough to realize that we're not making some sort of comeback in terms of habitat for humans and other organisms on Earth. So, I used to think I would live to be 100 years old. I'm no longer that deluded. Instead, I'm interested in living every day for the day, every moment for the moment. And if we can get a few more moments out and long enough to realize that habitat is being lost for our species, then that'll do. So, there you have it. More than you ever wanted to know about how long we have left after we lose habitat for humans on Earth. It won't be long. I would encourage you to live every moment as if it's your last. After all, the day draws near and it's not that far away. But between now and then, you might be able to take advantage of where you live and grow some plants or harvest some plants that are growing naturally and take advantage of the quote natural water supply and have the ability to filter your own water into potable form. Remember, at the edge of extinction, only love remains. And that love can extend to the natural world and also to your neighbors when we get to that point that everybody is suffering a little bit more.